Hello and welcome to Therapist Desk today, the podcast where we talk about everything mental health. I'm your host, Winnie, and today's conversation we will talk about shadow work in relationships. Before I tell you what shadow work is and who came up with shadow work, have you ever found yourself in a relationship where you're arguing, constantly fighting? Yes, I know every relationship argues and fights, but have you ever felt like sometimes you're speaking a totally different language with your partner? Shadow work in relationships is exactly your solution. Today, take your notebook and sit ready to learn. Before we delve into relationships, I want to define to you what shadow is. There is a psychologist called Carl Jung. He's the founder of this shadow work. And I'll define for you what shadow is. Shadow is the unconscious traits, the emotions, the characters, the behaviors, the way we express ourselves. Most of us were taught that expressing our emotions is a bad thing, so we suppress them. We have come to fear rejection so bad. So what we do is we become very distant when it comes to relationships. But just because we suppress these parts of our behavior, it doesn't mean that they go away. What happens is that they show up in sneaky ways, especially in the people closest to us. So the essence of shadow work is bringing those traits to light so that we can be able to heal, we can be able to grow, and we can be able to build healthier connections. Just to note, shadow work does not only apply in relationships. Shadow work applies almost in every aspect of your life. For example, in your self-awareness and in your personal growth. For you to understand why you do what you do, I feel like therapy is always about why you do what you do. For you to understand that aspect of self-awareness, you need to do some shadow work on yourself. If you're a leader, you need shadow work. For you to be able to regulate your emotions, you need shadow work. Work relationships, I didn't say work husbands, work relationships, you need shadow work. In your romantic relationships, which is exactly where we are going to expound, you need shadow work. So how when in your parenting, for those of us who are parents, you need shadow work so that you can avoid transferring traumas or repeating of patterns to your children. You need to do a lot of shadow work. Like we've said, shadow work is bringing those hidden traits to light so that we can heal, we can grow, and we can build healthier connections. We don't live in an island, we live in a very connected world. So for everyone to experience a healthier connection from you, you need to illustrate how shadow work shows up in relationship. We're going to meet Emma and her husband. His name is Dispenser. We're going to be able to see how shadow work can be done in relationships. The first way is through projection. Projection is where you're blaming your partner for your own unacceptable traits. You see that trait where you know very well you're lazy, you know that you're bitter, you know that you're arrogant, you know that you can come off as rude sometimes, but you don't want to accept them. So what you do is you start projecting and you start blaming your partner for it. So Emma and Dispenser have been married for 5 years. One Saturday morning, Emma walks into the living room and finds Dispenser scrolling on his phone while the dishes pile up in the sink. She instantly snaps. You're so lazy. You never help around here. Dispenser frowns. I clean the yard in the morning, he replies, confused by why is Emma exactly angry, but Emma is already storming off and feeling frustrated and unseen. Later that day, Emma takes a moment to reflect and realizes something. She has been avoiding house chores also, but did not want to admit it. Instead of facing her own procrastination, she projected it on Dispenser. You remember when I told you projection is blaming others for the behaviors you yourself you don't want to accept? Here, for this case of Emma, for her is procrastination. She doesn't want to accept the trait that she can procrastinate. So, how does the insight of shadow work here is when you judge your partner harshly, it's often because they reflect something that you haven't accepted about yourself. The reflection. Have you ever accused your partner of something that deep down you also struggle with? Have you ever stopped to wonder, or you feel triggered, or you're projecting a particular trait that you also are struggling with, but you don't want to admit it? That is what we call projecting, blaming others for what you are refusing to accept. The second way that shadow work shows up in relationship is through triggers. You see the common statement that says, I'm so triggered, or I was so triggered. That way, trigger is the strong emotional reaction to words or to action. We proceed with our story. That evening, Emma excitedly shares a business idea with Dispenser. He listens and then says, remember, Dispenser has listened. He listens and then he says, sounds interesting, but maybe you should wait until things settle down at work. Emma instantly feels her chest tightens. You never believe in me, she starts shouting. But Dispenser looks surprised. I didn't say that. I just thought that the timing might be tricky. Your idea is lovely, but the timing might be tricky. Emma spends that night replaying that conversation. And for sure, you know, when people replay the conversation, they end up concluding things that did not even exist in the conversation. Eventually, she realizes Dispenser commented the comment that Dispenser gave, which was, I like your idea, but the timing is a bit tricky, triggered her or triggered an old wound. Growing up, her father was emotionally distant and rarely acknowledged her achievements. Dispenser's words unknowingly reminded her of that pain. Remember, we've said that triggers are strong emotional reactions that can come from words, what someone says, or what someone does. So for here, shadow work here, the insight is triggers are emotional overreactions rooted in past experiences. When we overreact, it's a sign that something deeper is being activated. So next time when you catch yourself saying, I feel so triggered, please sit back and think, where is this thing rooted from? Where is this thing coming from? The reflection to you, my listeners, is what's a situation where your partner said or did something small, but it felt huge to you? Can it be tied to a past wound? I'd like to hear that in the Insta stories. Can it be tied to a past wound? Another way that shadow work can be done is through, or can be seen, is through avoidance. This is where you're struggling with vulnerability, you're struggling with trust, and you're struggling with intimacy. One night, our story, one night, Emma finally asked Dispenser, why is it so hard for you to talk about how you feel? Remember, she's always dated emotionally unavailable men. They're not bad, they just don't talk. They're not bad, they just don't say how they feel, but they're emotionally unavailable. And a disclaimer, not only men are emotionally unavailable, even women are emotionally unavailable. So this particular night, Emma gathers herself and decides to ask, by the way, why is it so hard for you to talk about your feelings? He shrugs. Talk, talking doesn't solve problems. Does that statement sound familiar? Talking doesn't solve problems. We just need to get through this day. Remember, if I can take you back, Dispenser had said the timing is bad at work. We can only assume maybe there was a lot of work, so many projects at hand. Yes. So talking doesn't solve problems. We just need to get through the day. Emma feels hurt. Every time she opens her mouth, she's always hurt because nothing gets solved. But instead of blaming him, she turns inward. She started learning. She realizes that she also struggles with vulnerability. Remember, she comes from an emotionally unavailable father. She also struggles with vulnerability, just in a different way. Instead of shutting down, she gets angry and critical. No lesson has been learned yet. I'm sorry I said she has started learning. Through shadow work, Emma learns to express her emotions calmly, and Dispenser starts working on his fear of emotional depth. They begin practicing small acts of vulnerability, like sharing childhood memories or writing each other notes. Over time, their relationship deepens. What is the inside of shadow work here? Avoidance of intimacy is always it's not isn't always obvious. It can look like emotional shutdown, or it can look like constant criticism. The reflection to my listeners: do you struggle with expressing emotions in your relationships? How do you protect yourself from emotional discomfort? Sometimes sitting in that discomfort is not so bad, because if you don't pick your lesson, you start going back to exactly what is familiar, even if it is painful. Our thoughts and our final thoughts and our final takeaway. And here's the challenge for you. Notice when you're blaming your partner. Notice when you feel triggered. Notice when you're repeating a pattern. and notice when you're being avoided. I'd really, really love to hear your thoughts. And I'd really love to hear your take on this. If you feel like you relate to this story of Emma and Dispenser, I just picked snippets of what would be important. If you feel like you relate to this story, please tell us, and we will be putting a place where we are able to have a conversation. Until next time, keep growing, keep healing, keep taking care of your mind, keep taking care of your heart. Thank you.